Ladies and gentlemen, here we are for a very special episode of Exploring the Illuminati Occult, part 37. Part 37. We started this series at the beginning of 2023, and we are now heading towards the end of 2023, while we have eviscerated, analyzed all the mysteries of the Illuminati. We couldn't really avoid talking, especially this week, about Israel and the end times. Of course, it's not going to be an easy one, so I have a lot of books here. I'm ready, and some really heavy ones, including the Encyclopedia of Zionism and Israel. So a lot of books to cite.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone from everywhere.
And we are, of course, starting with the Dance Macabre, our incredible episode. Here we are, Leo and Crazy Zagami. Saturday, October 14th of the year of the Lord 2023.
Are you going to dance? Don't leave it hanging. Everybody dance! It's Saturday night. We're feeling all right. I wish I was at the disco, but I'm not.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, there were some people who a week ago went out in the desert in Israel to simply dance.
Aspetta un attimo.
And what happened?
But we have to do the donation.
No. First of all,
Oh, what you said?
Yes, regarding dancing.
Okay.
I mean, there were some people who really went to enjoy themselves and ended up being assassinated. So I think that one prayer immediately for those people. And there is a lot to say about Israel in the end times. So it's going to be a really important episode, an episode that I take very seriously. So I'm here ready with all my books. I want to welcome those who might be even skeptic about today's episode. I'm sure they're gonna find something interesting for them. But of course,
I'm doing the Running Man.
Okay, so yesterday was Friday the 13th, Christy.
Mm-hmm.
Friday the 13th, back in 1307, was the date in which they dismantled the Knights Templars. The Knights Templar who were actually in charge of Gaza and the surrounding region from their fortress, which was based there in Gaza. At the same time, Gaza is also known for having had an enormous influence on the Sabbatean heresy, because one of the very early starters of this whole heresy was Nathan of Gaza. So a lot of things happened in this little piece of land inside Israel. But of course, we need to start our adventure here, that brings us towards Israel and the end times with the first Zionist Congress. That's why I have here with me this Encyclopedia of Zionism, which I'm consulting today, which of course sees as its protagonist right at the opening of the book, this figure, this historic figure of great importance within Judaism. Theodor Herzl. Here he was, another journalist, another writer, somebody who though gave birth to the first Zionist Congress. And we are here to explain also to everybody that there is various kinds of Zionism and that we need to study and analyze things before opening our mouth. So today, I want to open my show with my latest article on leozagami.com, because I think this article will inevitably set the pace for our discussion of today, which is a very important one, because there has been a lot of hate, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of disinformation, a lot of fake news circulating on all sides of the aisle. And at this point, it's important to understand why we can't blame those people who are living in Israel and their kibbutz. We can't even blame the Palestinians, though. We can't blame anybody, because these are the end times. And you can't take sides like in a football or a soccer match in the end times. Because in the end, Jesus, the Messiah, will come for everybody, regardless of your own faith. And it's very important for me today to open up with this speech. In my latest book, Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 9, 7 Steps to the Secrets of the New World Disorder, from transhumanism and immortality to Gnostic Jesus, UFOs, and insect witchcraft, I wrote the following in the introduction. To find the right solution, you need to know what the problems are. I also wrote, and there have always been problems in life, some requiring new and different strategies. The skeptics will say that there have always been wars and that natural disasters have plagued humanity for thousands of years. Now, I wrote also in Volume 9, societies have fallen with violence, and it's happened for centuries. For those, there is nothing to see or read in this new book, as there's nothing probably to listen or to view today from my show, because they have their own idea, their own pragmatism at times can lead them astray. I also wrote in chapter 2 of my latest book, in this battle for power and propaganda, the destiny of Ukrainian or Russian or the Russian population at large is of very little or no interest at all for the Illuminati elite, because as this war is part of their global Great Reset agenda. In this context, the Western mass media are undergoing extreme efforts to promote a deformed image of the conflict in Ukraine, of Russia, of the Russians, and of the President Vladimir Putin. Now, the same concept which I just announced to you can be very well also mentioned in the creation of this latest war. Because the war in Ukraine, built to help the global reset, can be adapted to the new war in Israel. In case you haven't noticed, your overlords want you to replace your virtual signaling "I support Ukraine" on your social media with the new "I support Israel" messaging for the latest war. Now, while I, of course, support myself personally more Israel than Palestine or the Islamic world for personal reasons, I want to be very honest with you. While Jewish people and Israel have done nothing wrong to me, actually they helped me during my life, the Islamic people kidnapped my only child, and I never saw him again since 2008. So I've lost a child to these people, to Sunni Islam, which is the one which Hamas follows. But regardless of that, I said there is no intention in today's broadcast transmission to take sides, because it will be completely idiotic to do so. It will be like falling in a trap which the ancient Romans used to call dividi et impera. No? Caesar coined this term, which means you divide and you conquer. And actually, like I wrote in volume 3 of my Confessions, Licio Gelli said that the Knights Templars used to always manage to rule over the Holy Land very easily, simply by getting one opposing side to the other of Islam against each other, because they were always divided up until now, at least. But the future might be very different. So in the last few days, we have seen, this increase in propaganda, pray for Israel message. And I completely understand that. But I don't understand giving more billions for foreign wars after wasting 160 billion on a comedian like Volodymyr Zelensky, a comedian that basically has been used in an attempt to bleed out Russia and Putin. And now that they are basically losing this war, because that's what's happening, they are about to throw in the towel at the debacle and move on to the debacle because they are losing this war. Their arm dealers are very happy. Everybody in the weapon industry is very happy. We go from one war to the other. I mean, if you remember, in June, Cristi, the Pentagon made an accounting error, freeing up to 6.2 billion for Ukraine military aid. And that was actually an accounting error on top of all the other billions we already gave them. And how convenient that now that most of the public is kind of losing interest in the war in Ukraine, and it's kind of like going against the war in Ukraine, suddenly we have a new war. We have a new war because, we are in the never-ending war mode, which George Orwell mentioned in 1984. So it's very convenient. And it's really weird that a group of third world Muslims using pickup trucks, hang gliders, improvised missiles, paragliders, whatever you want to call them, just managed to put in difficulty and create this kind of damage to the Israeli population. That rave in particular was moved to that location in the last few weeks. It shouldn't have been in that location. And strangely enough, the organizer, it's well alive and kicking and has no problems. It seems like the entire episode was a coordinated theatrical production with innocent people used as cannon fodder to generate outrage and hate on a level never seen before. The innocent die, while the creators of profit continue to make their money. And that is, of course, the military-industrial complex, and always will be. Now, yesterday, Alexander Dugin, who I've talked extensively about in volume 1 of my Confessions, and is one of Russia's most well-known ideologues, and has been described as Putin's brain, or Putin's Rasputin, also because of a little bit of his look, posted the following predictive analysis or prophecy, like he called it, on Twitter about the present situation, confirming the apocalyptic natures of the times we're living. So let us read and analyze what he has written, because I think it's very important. Now, Dugin said yesterday in this tweet, let us try to describe one of the possible scenarios of further escalation in the Middle East. Now, this is his scenario. Somebody very close to Vladimir Putin. If we need to, to analyze this, is another proxy war between America and China and Russia, and the Sino-Russian New World Order is, of course, advancing. And here we are with a guy like Joe Biden who keeps falling off stage. Just ridiculous that America can't find a better president. It's completely ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous. It's just the way it is when you have, of course, people behind the scenes who use him as a puppet, including Barack Hussein Obama. Now, the Palestinian uprising, says Dugin, begins in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is his vision of what might happen. Because, of course, now is Saturday. Now we are in an in-between situation in which the Israeli Defense Forces are kind of on hold, because once they go in, it's going to be a slaughterhouse. And that is going to be used to unite the rest of the Arab world. And that's going to be basically the beginning of the Third World War. Dugin says, the Palestinian uprising begins in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Mahmoud Abbas cannot contain the situation, and seeing Israel carrying out a full-blown genocide in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians launch an all-out revolt. The Israeli Defense Force continues to massacre civilians in the Gaza Strip, but there are growing protests around the world against Western pro-American liberal elites standing unanimously in favor of Israel. Remember that who's talking here is Alexander Dugin. He's a propagandist, of course, for Russia. Russia is not really condemning this whole thing because they, in some way, they are also behind Iran. Hezbollah, says Dugin, gets involved at that point, and crowds of Arabs from Jordan break through the cordons of the border. Jordan is a place that should have been really part of, it should have been actually called Palestine from the start. It could have been actually the place where a lot of the displaced people after 1948 could have been placed. But then this whole Cisjordanian, which is basically the West Bank, because in fact we call it in Italian Cisgiordania because it's part of Jordan. In any case, the US, says Dugin, launches preemptive strikes against Iran, which is increasingly involved in the conflict. We know that Iran, and this is me talking, not Dugin, is of course the leading Shiite country, and they are, strange enough, behind Hamas, which is actually Sunni, but they are definitely also behind the Hezbollah, which is Shiite, as the majority of Muslims in Lebanon are Shiite, not Sunni. Now, Dugin says that at this point, after the preemptive strike against Iran by the US, and Iran strikes back against Israel at that point, Syria enters the war, attacking the Golan Heights. There is a rapid mobilization of the entire Islamic world. That is really the problem. It's something which I already described and explained in volume 3 of my Confessions, which touch on the subject of the construction of the Third Temple and the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But what does Dugin say? He says pro-American Islamic states, Saudi Arabia, United the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, etc., are being forced to join the confrontation on the side of the Palestinians at that point. They are joined by Pakistan, Turkey, and Indonesia. And then Dugin makes even this forecast of the story of the Taliban sending troops of the Middle East from fake news becomes reality. The black banners of Khorasan are hosted over the world. You remember the ISIS Khorasan flags in Afghanistan. Problems between Salafi, this is very important because this is where we go, and it's very interesting that Dugin has published this on the 13th, Friday the 13th, which I repeat is also connected to the Knights Templars, because the Knights Templars always managed to divide the various factions of Islam. But in this situation, instead, Dugin says, problems within Salafists and traditionalists, including Shiites, fade into the background. The great jihad of the Islamic world against the West and Israel is beginning. Problems between Salafists and traditionalists is one thing, but then, of course, Dugin talks about Russia. Russia takes first a neutral position, which is what they're doing now, but does not rush to support Israel, as it is at war in Ukraine with the West, which in turn is completely on Israel's side. Okay, so Dugin seems to understand this is a big mess, but let's see where he goes, because I repeat, Alexander Dugin is at times called the brain of Putin. So we want to know what the brain of Putin is thinking. Now, at some point in the uprising in East Jerusalem, says Dugin, Palestinians proclaimed the need to cordon off the Al-Aqsa Mosque for protection from the Israeli Defense Forces. Al-Aqsa Mosque was mentioned in the beginning of the uprising in the Gaza Strip, Al-Aqsa flood, but also I would like to add the name of the Hamas brigade attacking, the Al-Aqsa brigades. Israel, in the course of fighting armed Palestinian militias and in the self-defense, launches a rocket attack on the mosque. It collapses. The path to building the Third Temple is clear, but 1 billion Muslims, of whom 50 million officially are in Europe, start an uprising now in the West itself. Now, let me intervene again, because I close the quote now from Dugin, because we are already seeing that in France, which is the place with most Muslims, the place which in the last few decades, a couple of decades, has seen the systematic destruction, sabotage of many churches by the Muslims. I talk about it in my books, talk about it in volume 4, talk about it because it's obvious that there is the clear intention, and I talk about it again in volume 5, the clear intention of not doing anything. Most of the time they don't even talk about the fact that almost 1,000 churches in France have been damaged in one way or another by Muslims. So, going back to Dugin, he says, at that point, civil war erupts in Europe. Some Europeans are on the side of the LGBT, Soros, Atlanticist elites, the libtards. Most of the people, sadly, that go to universities today are brainwashed with certain values, so that's it. Better not send your kids in a university today, because it's going to be inevitably brainwashed and turned out to be libtard. But let's continue with what Dugin says. Some Europeans are on the side of LGBT, Soros, Atlanticist elites, and some make an alliance with Muslims on the model of Alain Soral and join the anti-liberal revolution. This is what Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain, sees in the future. And this is the most important part of yesterday's prophecy. Quote, the US uses tactical nuclear weapons against Iran. Russia launches a tactical nuclear strike against Ukraine, which seeks to cling to the West at any cost and provokes Moscow in every way possible. Now, this is easy to imagine. Now that gradually, already the Pentagon has announced they're running short on money. Now we don't even have yet a Speaker of the House, so we can't really reconfirm the budget to send more money to Ukraine. Ukraine is inevitably feeling abandon, and they could become very dangerous. They could do crazy things. They could actually sabotage willingly themselves the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. They could transform the whole place in a wasteland. So that is very much possible. So what Dugin says here is very much possible. Actually, could be even worse. At that point, Russia launches a tactical nuclear strike against Ukraine, which seeks to cling to the West at any cost and provokes Moscow in every way possible. Okay. World War III erupts at that point, because with the, you use the nuke, World War III erupts officially. We are already in World War III. I mean, of course, then we will have also Taiwan, and Dugin actually talks about that too. This follows also everything I have written in volume 7 of my Confessions, which is a very important book, So, World War III erupts, Russia finally makes up its mind and sides with the Muslims, says Dugin. American dispensationalists realize that the hour has come. Russia is attacking, albeit indirectly, Israel. Gog is here. Here, obviously, the reference to Gog and Magog of the Bible. In the Russian vision, says Dugin, the West is under direct rule of Antichrist. Very Russian. Direct rule of Antichrist. Of the Antichrist, but it's broken English. Almost as broken as mine. Many world leaders die, new one with far more radical beliefs appear. China attacks Taiwan, distracting the US and NATO to a new target. India, says Dugin, refrains from direct support to the US, the support the US is counting on. The evening of history ceases to be languid. Feminists, gay activists, and environmentalists demand an end to it all, but no one listens to them. Who's going to listen to them? I mean, the relevance of the LGBTQ BS and all that, once the war starts, is going to just fade. In the matter of a year or two, you're not going to even believe they even existed. The percentage is going to go back to the 2-3% of the population, which originally was the homosexual LGBT population of America, not the fake LGBTQ population built by the propaganda, which now in the universities counts over 30 or 40% of the individuals. I'm talking about realistically, because the moment the war starts, well, I'm sure that most women are not going to be hanging out with transsexuals or people who are a little bit weak. They would like to have some strong man with a pair of balls who knows how to use a weapon, how to kill, because that's a way of surviving for mankind. And it's all about survival at that point. It's not anymore about the end of an empire, a little bit like the Roman Empire, in which you had pedophiles, you have depravities of all kinds, and everybody was doing all kinds of things like they do right now. But then the empire finished, the barbarians arrived, and at that point, there was no pedophilia to be found in the empire, because you would be automatically killed, hanged on a rope. So, I know that this can upset some people, but I'm being very realistic. This is about realism. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm fine.
no, so the West, says Dugin, is forced to fight against everyone in the name of some goal it can no longer articulate. All of these, theses about human rights, civil society, and other incantations have disappeared in the harsh reality of the coming total death. Elon Musk, says Dugin, at that point admits that he has completely stopped understanding what is happening. You know that Elon Musk likes to always think he's smarter than anybody else regarding the future, but at that point, even Elon Musk. Now, a very important passage of Dugin's thing here. Israel is beginning under blows of all sides to build the third temple. Only Messiah can save the situation. This is where the text of the predictive analysis prophecy abruptly ends. And this is where Alexander Dugin's tweet ends. A tweet he made on Friday the 13th of October of the year of the Lord, 2023. Remember, no one will win the Israel versus Hamas war, because no one is meant to win this war. Biden is already doling out the first 8 billion to Israel on top of the billions we already gave to Ukraine to further help bankrupt America and aid the rise of the Great Reset, where we will own nothing and all be happy. Because, as I explained, in Confessions of the Illuminati, Volume 7, from the occult roots of the Great Reset to the populist roots of the Great Reject, war remains a huge money-making venture, in America, with its vast military empire and its ever so incestuous relationship with a host of international defense contractors, has been until now one of its biggest buyers and sellers of such business. Thanks, of course, to all those swamp creatures in Washington, D.C. In this context, the American military-industrial complex has erected an empire unsurpassed in history, but things are changing on the horizon and not looking good for Uncle Sam, as the powerful members of the Jesuit Illuminati elite are preparing to switch to the new Chinese world order with the help of Russia. This is me from Volume 7. In the end, no one will win the Syrian war. No one will win the war in Libya, that the last month saw the deadly flooding that seemed like a typical divine retribution. They won't allow a true end of the Ukrainian war, and Iraq and Afghanistan, to tell you the truth, are only on hold because they are kept there just to be reignited with, oh, we need a war. Well, where are we going to go and throw these missiles? Like George Orwell wrote in 1984, the war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. A hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation. That's why it's completely idiotic to take sides. Of course, we can't be on the sides of people who kill babies or do other terrible things, but we have to also understand that that is done on purpose. You see, in Volume 8 of my confession, I explained to you how from the 90s to now, Hollywood and this whole propaganda system has pushed violence through hundreds, thousands of movies that make us more and more violent. So if you didn't see babies with the head chopped off, you will not really be interested in it. That's the truth. You will not be interested in the war in Israel. They have to make it more gruesome than ever. And when it comes down to then picking up all the beautiful ladies and bringing them in Gaza, it reminds me of Il Ratto delle Sabine, which is basically something from ancient Rome. I mean, something that people were doing in ancient times. Let's go and get all the beautiful ladies from this village or this city, and then we can build our own city with all these beautiful ladies. That was what they used to do. I mean, it was part of war. Okay? So the war is not meant to be won because we are in the end times. But remember, even if the West is under the direct rule of Antichrist, as Dugin said in his broken English, and in the end, we need to also listen to his message that only the Messiah can save the situation. That means we don't despair. Are we simply living in the end times? That's how it is. And this is only the beginning. So you need to prepare your mindset, in this case, because we are living in a very particular moment in human history, unprecedented. So live accordingly and don't take sides in any of these wars, as this is not a football match. And when the Messiah returns, he will punish the Antichrist, as well as the elites who have permitted all these monstrosities, but also the idiots who went along with the false narrative and propaganda. Those people who are telling you now to take sides don't get the bigger picture. But at the same time, we can't even be overly simplistic, because I respect my colleague David Icke, for example. I saw what he said. And I'm glad that he has mentioned the Sabbateans as being behind a lot of this. But he doesn't get the bigger picture. It's overly simplistic. And so where are you going to leave the Vatican and the Jesuits? when it comes down to the relationship between the Sabbatians and the Vatican, well, I have to go to my old friend Barry Kamish, Shabbatai Zevi, Labor Zionism and the Holocaust, the late Barry Kamish. Yes, only the Messiah can and will save us, because, like I wrote in Volume 7, Revelation speaks of natural cataclysms, plagues that will follow the arrival of the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. Amongst them, the second horse is the red horse of war, described in Revelation 6:4 in this way: another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. Interesting, like I said, how Alexander Dugin made his prophetic tweet on Friday, October the 13th, the very same day that saw in 1307 the end of the Knights Templar, who used to have a fortress in Gaza and the surrounding region, and dominate the surrounding region from their fortress. And if you want to know more about this, of course, now, let's follow also the build-up of Israel. How it was built, how it came together, and the responsibilities for what is happening today. One of the main responsibilities for this mess needs to go to Great Britain, the United Kingdom. Absolutely. And of course, at that point, we need to go and check out the Balfour Declaration. And even before the Balfour Declaration, the Sykes-Picot Agreement from 1916, which was a treaty between the United Kingdom and France, which assent the Russian Empire, that in that moment had other problems, and the Kingdom of Italy to define their mutually agreed spheres of influence and control, of course, what used to be the Ottoman Empire. That at that point, because of the Sabbatians, the Dome, as they call them in Turkey, and Ataturk, and the Young Turks, and all that, there was, of course, rising to bring us what we have now, which is modern Turkey, no longer the Ottoman Empire. But also, we need to talk about Zionism, because Zionism is also a very complex matter that you cannot say, this is Zionism. No. There is various kinds of Zionism. There's various kinds of Zionism, various types of Zionism, and the most dangerous is obviously labor Zionism. So we need to get you to understand how this influence also the progressive side of Judaism, which of course manifests also with the word Union for Progressive Judaism, which was a creation of a guy called Claude Montefiore. How we have the Aliyah, which is basically the immigration, the massive immigration of Jews that permitted the construction of Israel, the first Aliyah, the second Aliyah. Now, Aliyah, my pronunciation, of course, is not of somebody who knows the Jewish language very well, so please forgive me. Now, I need to explain you, first of all, how we arrived to this first Zionist Congress. Because, of course, we have seen, the Jews have always been persecuted. At times, they might have created, at times, problems for themselves by some of the revolts. When it came down to the Romans, no, this brought inevitably, there was no problem between the Roman Empire and the Jews. Still nowadays, the biggest Jewish community in the world is in Rome, and the biggest, at least the oldest, and one of the most respected, which I learned to respect myself and studied amongst the Jews, thanks to the Sonnino family in early 90s. And this was of great help for my development, spiritual development, to live in the Jewish ghetto for a number of years. After I did the magic of Abramelin the Mage, which was, by the way, a Jewish ritual. Thanks, Bruce. I pronounced it well. Now, what happens here? Happens that with all this persecution, continuous persecution, then there was, I think, around 120 after Christ, also there were other two revolts by at the end, the Romans got so angry that the Jews were once again kicked out of their land, lost the possibility of living in Israel, something that they reacquired only much, much, much later. And of course, we all know what happened in 1948. And here I have for Christie some things, but also I wanted to show you how detailed, when it comes down to the documentation that I have studied today, I would like to show you also, this land, this incredible land, including the Gaza Strip, this land, which of course it's been the promised land, but it's also been a very contested land. And so we need to understand the problems. Now, when it comes down to Zionism, we talk about a multifaceted reality. A multifaceted reality which eventually will bring us the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration is the moment in which the branch of the Rothschild family in Great Britain, which descended from the Austrian, they were recognized by Queen Victoria as being noble, as being barons also in England, but they originally were made, their peerage was made in Austria. That means that suddenly this family transformed itself. This family that, of course, helped build a Sabbatean Frankist reality from the very start. But the people who then went there and genuinely started to live there and sacrifice themselves to build the reality, what kind of thoughts do they have in all this mess? Now, let's go to the guy who brought us towards what will become the Balfour Declaration, because the Balfour Declaration, like I said, is something that we'll see as it was basically a letter that was written and sent to the Baron Rothschild from the British authorities, from the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Arthur Balfour, and this is the original letter sent on November 2nd, 1917. And we also know that the 2nd of November has very particular meaning because, it's not a normal day, no? For the Christians, at least for the Catholics. We are talking about the Day of the Dead then at that point, no? We are getting into that period of the year. Dear Lord Rothschild, and you can read this letter, Christian.
I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government's view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political statute enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation.
Now, this was the Balfour Declaration. That was the moment of great change, but it wasn't yet the moment in which this great change took place, because we know that between then and 1948, a lot of things happened. Now, going back to the history of Zionism, there is a figure called Theodor Herzl. We showed before, I showed the image of Theodor Herzl because he is, of course, portrayed right at the opening of the Encyclopedia Zionism, this big figure, Now, he was an Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist and political activist who is considered the father of modern political Zionism. He formed basically the Zionist organization and promoted Jewish immigration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state. Why did he do all this? Because of the experiences that he had in his life. Because of what happened to the Jews back then, was the pogroms in Russia, the persecution in other parts of the world, and in the case of Theodor Herzl, there was also his particular interest in the Dreyfus affair, which basically became the Paris correspondent for the Viennese newspaper called Neofre Press. And he was confronted with anti-Semitic events in Vienna, but then he was, covering the Dreyfus affair, which was a political scandal that erupted in France that regarded basically a miscarriage of justice and complete anti-Semitism against Captain Alfred Dreyfus, who was convicted of treason mainly because of his Jewish descent. Now, Theodor Herzl is the guy who will create the basis for the Balfour Declaration, but that will be, of course, the creation of the World Zionist Organization. And the World Zionist Organization, of course, is the event of all events, the initiative that Theodor Herzl and the First Zionist Congress that took place in Basel, in Switzerland, in 1897. The goals of the Zionist movement were set in this Basel program. And together with the World Zionist Organization, there will be created a parallel organization known as the Jewish Agency for Israel. Now, it's very important to understand why all this was created. It was created because, of course, they wanted to incentivize and open the possibility to all Jews who were suffering in one way or another of persecution in Europe and in other parts of the world, the possibility of going to Israel. But also there was something else, because there is something really particular about Zionism. Zionism is not, like I said, there is various types of Zionism. And so we start by talking about, of course, the guy who is most known, But the types of Zionism, and so, of course, we talk about political Zionism, and when it comes to political Zionism, we have to talk about Theodor Herzl and Max Nordau in Russia. The approach espoused at the First Zionist Congress was aimed at establishing for the Jewish people a publicly and legally assured home in Palestine, which, amongst other items, included initial steps to obtain governmental grants from the established powers that controlled the area. There is also practical Zionism, synthetic Zionism, liberal Zionism, and most of all, labor Zionism, which is a very big problem. And of course, that is a creation of the Sabbatian Frankists. Now, some of the figures, the most progressive figures that laid the foundations of Israel, were part of this progressive socialist upbringing. David Ben-Gurion, for example. David Ben-Gurion, who is one of the most important, was the primary national founder of the State of Israel, as well as the state's first prime minister. David Ben-Gurion was one of these progressive figures. But not only him. Another before him, a little bit time before him, who was connected to Lord Rothschild, there was another progressive figure, Chaim Azriel Weizmann. This is another figure always that brings us. So you see, there is all these various figures that. Christy, what do you think of the? I mean, here we are laying the foundations for 1948, because then in 1948, of course, we have the creation of the State of Israel. But a lot of other things happened. You have to understand that not all Jews were supportive of Zionism, of actually going there and creating this land of Israel. And during the period in which there was the Holocaust, there is testimonies of Jews who wanted to go elsewhere and were sent there, forced almost there. Now, the Balfour Declaration was, like I said, in 1917, Chaim Weizmann, which we just mentioned being a progressive figure, became president of the British Zionist Federation. He worked with the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour to obtain the milestone Balfour Declaration, which stated in writing that in exchange for bringing America into the... Because that's the thing. Why did they make this declaration? Apparently, in exchange to bring America into the First World War against Germany. The British will give then Palestine to basically the Rothschild Zionists. His Majesty's government view with favored establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use the best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. So, after the Balfour Declaration was sent, the letter that we just shown that you read, a week after, it was published by the press, and later was incorporated into the peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire and the mandate for Palestine. The original document is kept to this day in the British Library. The reason that America entered World War I, for some people, is connected to this kind of exchange of favors, leading to the defeat and destruction of Germany, though, which didn't forget what happened. And then, of course, later on with Adolf Hitler would come, it would be, though, also very important to understand that Hitler was also another instrument, because there is also some shocking declarations that were made that I need to talk about when it comes to the Holocaust, for example. But talking about the Balfour Declaration, the Germans apparently realize only a couple of years later, in 1919, when there was the Paris Peace Conference, and there was present a delegation of 117 Jews headed by Bernard Baruch, that they showed this declaration. And at that point, the Germans understood that they had been basically cutting out, that basically there was a plan against them. Let's remember that all this was done between very big powers in Europe that were kind of instrumentally using also and also let's remember that we are talking about an area, country that was divided. Here I have a map, I think, when the declaration was made, which explains all the various. Let me see if I can find it. The various. This is the 6-Day War. Sorry, guys, but it's not easy. Fortunately, might be this other one. This encyclopedia is pretty vast. Of course, we are talking about various anomalies that, in a way or in another, brought us to where we are now. So it's important to understand them, I think. This is, talking about these various figures that might not interest everybody, but is important for you to then understand where we are now. So one of these, I would say, one of the more progressive figures was this Chaim-based man. Now, the very first mention of the word Holocaust in regards to World War II came as early as 1936 from the leader of labor Zionism, Chaim Weizmann. While addressing the World Zionist Congress, Weizmann, who would later become Israel's first president in 1936, made the following dreadful pronouncement. And this is important that all of you listen to what he said. Quote, open quote. Perhaps only 2 million Jews will survive the upcoming Holocaust. Between brackets, yes, he used that word. But they will be strong and good for the land of Israel. The rest will be blown into the dust pile of history. Mm-hmm. So in 1936, before the Holocaust kickstarts, and by the way, Hitler didn't really want to kill, but it was the great Mufti who convinced, apparently, Adolf Hitler to kill them rather than displace them or send them elsewhere. This guy, Chaim Weizmann, who would later become Israel's first president, said perhaps only 2 million Jews will survive the upcoming Holocaust, but they will be strong and good for the land of Israel. The rest will be blown into the dust pile of history. The term Holocaust is too often used without regards to its true meaning. Rabbi Marvin Antelman, which books I have over there, can you pick me up the books of Rabbi Marvin Antelman? Those two, volume 1 and 2. Volume 1 and 2. Eliminate here. Now, here. When it comes down to the term Holocaust, Rabbi Altman stated that well before World War II, the religious term meant burnt offering, as in sacrifice. He quotes Bruno Bettelmann, who said, calling the most callous, most brutal, most horrid, most heinous mass murder a burnt offering is a sacrilege, a profanation of God and man. So whose sacrifice was it? For what purpose? Obviously, it was done to satisfy the Sabbatean Frankist occult agenda. Now, for those who don't know what Sabbatean Frankists are, we talked about it in the past. I wrote about it extensively in Volume 4 of my Confessions, and also in Volume 7 and even Volume 9, I talk about them. It's an heresy within Judaism. So you see that here we go well beyond Zionism. Because then when it comes down to Zionism, and, James Weissman said once, every nation has its dead in its fight for its homeland. The suffering under Hitler are dead. Almost like it was, a sacrifice.
So evil.
Rabbi Schoenfeld calls the Zionist war criminals for usurping the leadership of the Jewish people, betraying them to be slaughtered, and then reaping the moral capital for their own treasury. He states the Zionist approach that Jewish blood is the anointing oil needed for the will of the Jewish state is not a thing of the past. It remains operable to this very day. But let's go back to the beginning of this whole thing, because we said that there was, of course, a moment which was the Balfour Declaration, that came along because of a guy who, of course, is mentioned today quite a lot. And that guy, of course, is also on the opening of my here, these 2 volumes of the Encyclopedia Zionism, Theodor Herzl. Now, Theodor Herzl, apparently, how did he arrive to this concept of Zionism, rediscovering really the importance of Israel? Now, there is some elements here that are very important that we need to understand before we talk more about the labor Zionist. Because, of course, I would like to give you a full perspective, but it's not easy. There is also the involvement of the evangelicals in the rise of let's say, of Zionism, if we want, which, like I said, it was meant to happen because it's part of the end times, and it's not something we can say, but things could have gone different. No, they couldn't have gone different. Now, in the 17th century, something which is known as how you spell it? Restorationism gained back attention with a guy called Lord Shaftesbury. That is actually right next to Piccadilly Circus, Shaftesbury Avenue, dedicated to him. His political influence was very much, but also he was very much involved in proposing the return of the Jews to Palestine. He sent a memorandum around to the Protestant monarchs of Europe and moved to get a British consul, a bishop, a former rabbi, Michael Alexander, installed in Jerusalem. But Shaftesbury was not alone. It was one guy in particular, a Scottish clergyman, Reverend Alexander Cate, who was probably the first in 1843 to coin the phrase "a land without a people for a people without a land." This was after he visited Palestine in 1839. It's very important to understand the evangelical element here, and I tell you why. Because next to actually, Theodor Herzl was inspired himself by somebody who I'm going to show you now, who was actually not Jewish, but was an English Restorationist Anglican clergyman called William Heckler. William Heckler was born in 1845, died in 1941, and was a crusader against anti-Semitism, a promoter of Zionism, and aid counselor, friend, and legitimizer of Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism. Now, you don't need to go, I don't know, in some obscure book to find this information. You can simply go on Wikipedia and you see that what I'm telling you is true. So there was a very strong evangelical element in bringing back the notion that Israel was the promised land of the Jews and that they needed to go back there and reclaim this land. It says here, see, counsel, friend, and legitimizer of Theodore Else. So he wasn't a rabbi. He was actually an Anglican clergyman, born in the Hindu city of Benares. Here he is. And because of his work, early Zionism activism, Herzl understood even more the importance of reclaiming the Holy Land. I mean, think about it. What do evangelical Christians always talk about? So William Henry Heckler, as somebody has pointed out, was a very important figure. He was an important figure, but there was also another important figure whose book, because of course there is always an inspiration, no? William Heckler, but then there is another important figure that I would like to show you, which is the author of this book, The Coming Prince, Sir Robert Anderson. Now, this guy is a very interesting guy because he was a Scotland Yard intelligence officer, all these kind of things. He adopted the techniques of his investigation to actually study the Holy Scriptures and to arrive to understand, of course, the second coming. And of course, he said, if you don't believe in the return of Jesus, you are not a Christian, because that is the very central role of the whole thing. So, Sir Robert Anderson, another important figure, who even before Zionism fully developed, he was actually analyzing and also agreeing with some of the, here it says, read here.
Sir Robert Anderson was an investigator with Scotland Yard who turned his investigative skills to the Book of Daniel. This book examines the 9th chapter of Daniel, especially the 70 weeks and coming of the Antichrist, but also provides apologetic evidence for the genuineness of the Book of Daniel, examining its date and authorship. He is also the author of several other books. Let me read that?
No, but so interesting. But there is more here that, of course, we need to address in today's show, which is trying to really do an impossible mission, because a show like this should last a week, you know. Now, Barry Camish says, the Rothschild goal, quote, I'm quoting Barry Camish, my late friend Barry Camish, said the Rothschilds' goal was to control the wealth of the planet, and the Frankist vision was the destruction of Jewish ethics, to be replaced by a religion based on the exact opposite of God's intentions. When these factions blended, a bloody war against humanity with the Jews on the front lines erupted, and it is reaching its very pinnacle at this moment. This is what he wrote. Barry Camish, by the way, is a guy who lived in Israel, was part of the Israeli Defense Forces. In the early 80s, he actually fought, I think, in Lebanon. And Barry Camish claims that there will be no modern state of Israel without British Freemasonry also, which is something I completely agree with, and I talked about in volume 2 of my Confessions. In the 1860s, the British Israelites, says Barry Camish, movement was initiated from within Freemasonry. Its goal was to establish a Jewish Masonic state in the Turkish province of Palestine. Initially, British Jewish Masonic families like the Rothschilds and Montefiores provided the capital to build the infrastructure for the anticipated wave of immigration. However, luring the Jews to Israel was proving difficult because, guys, it didn't really work out at the beginning. The beginning of this, when they went initially, the first Aliyah, also known as the agriculture Aliyah, or however you said, actually pronouncing well, was a major wave of Jewish immigration to the Ottoman Empire, Syria, between 1881 and 1903. Now here we were not even we were really in the early stages, and there was not even a World Zionist Congress yet that had fully manifested their intentions. But there was another organization also that was present at the very early stages of Zionism, and it's recognized as being very important. B'nai Brit. B'nai Brit is an organization. It's a form of Jewish Freemasonry, let's say. Okay? Jewish Freemasonry. So, Jewish Freemasonry, because in Germany they wouldn't let the Jews in the lodges, they created B'nai Brit. And it still is in existence today. And in fact, I show you something that was published last year. Here we are. The importance and the relevance of the B'nai Brit, which is also in the hands of Sabbatean Frankists. That means people who don't really care about real Judaism, because revisionist Zionism, progressive Zionism is also part of the problem here. It says, B'nai Brit has significant presence at First Zionist Congress 125th anniversary event. B'nai Brit International joined in force a series of events, August 28 and 29, organized by the World Zionist Organization in Basel, Switzerland, marking the 125th anniversary of the First Zionist Congress, convened there on the same dates in 1897 by Theodor Herzl. The First Congress founded the World Zionist Organization and discussed Herzl's vision for the establishment of a Jewish state. Remember, B'nai Brit is the most powerful form of Jewish Freemasonry. But not necessarily. I met people from B'nai Brit, and I didn't find them particularly religious. Actually, I was very disappointed by B'nai Brit on various occasions. I met also the head of B'nai Brit in Rome. I met with some of the representatives in Oslo, and I was very disappointed when they gave an award to an OTO member in Oslo, the B'nai Brit, to my super enemy. No, Farset.
I thought that. Oh, I don't know that one.
It's always mentioned in volume 1. So, I mean, it's.
Oh, that guy. Okay, yeah. I remember him.
Jun Farset, or whatever his name. Okay, so what happens here is that we are in front of various forms of Zionism. So, where is the socialist Zionism coming from? We talked about these various. Aliyah, no? The first one was very difficult, but even the second Aliyah was very difficult. In fact, it was the first David Ben Gurion, who estimated that 90% of the second Aliyah despaired of the country and left. The conditions were very harsh there, They arrived there and they said, well, what is this shit? I'm going to go to America to make some money. I mean, do I have to go there, dig the land? The thing that I wanted to obsess today is that those people who built those kibbutz, in fact, the kibbutz is a very socialist and communist concept, are the people that, in a way, inherited that that those Jews who arrived with the second Aliyah were basically Jews that were escaping the anti-Semitism of the pogroms in Russia, the first Russian Revolution. But they had those communist values that then later on will give birth to the Soviet Union, because their enemy in their eyes was not was the Tsar, who had instigated a campaign of anti-Semitism, and the Tsarist police, who, by the way, promoted the forgery of the protocols of the sages of Zion that still circulates also in the Middle East. So here we have, especially there was the terrible, the Kishinev pogrom, which was a massacre, an anti-Jewish riot that took place in basically Moldova, which is next to Ukraine. In the and during this pogrom, which became synonymous with one of the worst, it started on Easter Day, and 49 Jews were killed, 92 were gravely injured, and a number of Jewish women were raped. Over 500 were lightly injured, and 1,500 homes were damaged, burned, destroyed. But going back to the Jewish colonization, if it wasn't obviously for the Rothschild financing it, because at that point, the World Zionist Organization didn't have much money. And the Rothschild will buy land for these people who settled there. But I want to stress this. Those Jews who went there, settled, and they break their, literally, as we say, their back to construct this reality with a lot of hard work in a place that didn't have anything to offer at that time. Yes, the promised land. Oh, great. But guys, it's a very harsh land, partly deserted. We saw it in the last few days. It's not really this, it's harsh at times living there, and doesn't have much to offer. So what they have managed to build since their arrival, since their first, second, and then of course after the 1948 foundation of Israel, and before, during the whole Holocaust period, in which they were deliberately sent more and more to that land, to colonize that land, in the end, today, those Israelis who live there, what kind of thoughts do they have? If they have managed to actually build a nice kibbutz, a nice reality, a nice agricultural reality, they actually manage to make money and build a decent country in a place in which the Arabs have been completely ineffective. And guys, I come from Sicily. I have also partly Jewish blood. But of course, I have also Zagam has also Islamic Shiite origins. I know exactly that because of that influence of the Arabs, we now have the mafia. If it wasn't for that kind of mentality, I hate that mentality. I hate going to Sicily and see people who are so fucking lazy they can't move to do a simple thing. I literally hate it. The last time I went there with her, you remember, I was completely pissed off. These people, take it easy, take it easy, have an ice cream, They move so slowly in that kind of Arab pace. Turks or Arabs, same thing. We say in Rome, we have a saying, voglia di lavorare, saltami addosso, which means the will to work, jump on me, because they have no will to work. They're completely lazy. So going back to Israel and those people who managed to build with the sacrifice, of course, they arrived 100 years ago. There were only 40,000 probably Jews living there. And there were 700,000, though, Palestinian Arabs. At this point, if the mistakes were made back then and were made by the British Empire, and everything that happened in that period, Because later on then, we start seeing the birth of a Palestinian national identity. But the Palestinian national identity comes also after the foundation of Jordan, who, by the way, should have been really called Palestine. And, there's a lot of hypocrisy, guys. There's a lot of hypocrisy because, when they say, okay, all the Arab countries are there being horrified and acting like, oh, it's terrible what is happening in Gaza. So why don't you open the gates and let all the people in Egypt? Because that is not convenient for you? Because it will ruin the tourism of the Sinai? That is the thing, guys. Opportunism on all sides here. And of course, somebody says the Jews have their mafia too, of course, but here we're talking about a Semitic probably and a very old tradition to behave in a certain way. But when it comes down to, like I said, what we're discussing today and the war that is taking place in Israel is the result of compromises that were made a long time ago by European powers when America didn't have a say yet in that part of the world. That's the problem here. I like the fact that nowadays, you see today, what did we see today? What did we see today? Today we saw thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people marching in London with the Palestine flag. Maybe somebody should remind those people that if we have this problem, it's because of what was going on in London. When I see those idiots from Channel 4, English Channel 4 saying, interviewing the Israeli with outrage, saying, oh, but don't you think you might kill innocent people? Hypocrites. English hypocrites. English hypocrites. God will curse you. You, your royal family, your whole kingdom is cursed. And it's already in decline, and it will fall to the Muslims who will take it over soon because you are a bunch of idiots. That's the truth. They had a big British Empire. The British Empire! The British Empire! Listen, my dear friends, I'm a relative of that king you have there in that idiotic country of yours. And you better get a grip. What did I say in the English lodge that guested me when I was in London in 2018 or 19? I was guested in the lodge. I think it was for your rising of your Master Masonry, And I made a speech. We were in a church of St. Edmunds, this lodge. The Thistle. The Thistle Lodge. Okay.
The Order of the Thistle.
No, okay. So let me tell you. Yeah, the Thistle. Go ahead. But in any case, we were in this lodge where Christy was raised to Master Mason, and they invited me to give me a speech as I was at the time a Grand Master of the Strict Templar Observance. As a Templar, I gave a speech. We were in a church. There was the image of Jesus behind us. And I said, dear brothers, if you don't change things soon in this country of yours, the Muslims will never let you survive. You will never be able to have your Masonic lodges. Isn't that true, Christy? You remember?
I remember when you said it. And it didn't go over too well.
It didn't go over too well. They even tried to cut short. They cut short. They were like...
They censored you. They got upset.
The British. They got.
That's probably why they made me wait so long.
What is Zagami? Oh, Zagami. And at one point, so I ended the speech and I said, remember, the cornerstone of the craft is this guy here. And I pointed to Jesus. And I said, you don't follow what I'm saying? No problem. You will perish. And that's what's going to happen, inevitably. Inevitably. So It's about understanding here that in the end times, nobody's right or wrong. We are simply in front of a great event that, by the way, is recognized by Christians, Muslims, and even Jews, because they might have not recognized Jesus the first time he comes around, but they will definitely recognize him the second time. And for Islam, it is Jesus who comes in the end times, because Muhammad apparently went way too up in the sky. I don't know. He kind of like disappeared.
Except in the clouds.
No, I think he took a SpaceX and flew to Mars with Elon Musk. Now, I am telling you here, this football match mentality that is like, I want to push my idea and you have to accept the fact that now we need to finance the next war because the next war is the right war and the next war is the war that Israel is fighting. So let's send them, or it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. Of course, I support completely those innocent Jews, those Jews, hard workers who made this land, this harsh land, into a beautiful reality within all these countries that don't manage to offer anything to their people. I have been to the Middle East, on the contrary of many people who are there, but never have been to the Middle East. I have been to the Middle East, and not as a tourist. And not as a tourist. So it was a different way of seeing things, with the respect of the Muslim, the respect of the Christians, and the respect of the Jews. I went there and I opened the eyes and I tried to understand things. And it was an eye-opener for me, and I think it was an eye-opener also for the people who were with me that time. I went down there thanks to the Boutros Ghali, to the Boutros Ghali family, the family of Boutros Ghali, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. Boutros Ghali family is in charge of the Coptic Christians, who are the most ancient Christian formation in the world. They predate the Vatican. Is always begging them, because they are the most old. They are the oldest ones. They're the one closest to Jesus. And in fact, when Boutros got to dig that old part to make an archaeological discovery, unprecedented, right at the center of the Coptic area, which is now surrounded by police and everything, because of course those are Christian churches that are it's at high risk. Well, at the center of those churches, there was a synagogue. It was there that the original Christians started, with a synagogue. So when you have all these people who follow people like Kanye West and their hate for Jews, and I see, really, I'm sorry to say, but the narrative that is recently followed by people in the alternative media seems completely ridiculous and highly incoherent, because you are basically supporting the narrative that they are feeding you in your mouth. It's like George Orwell said, give us the 2 minutes of hate. Okay, let's project a few dead bodies here and everybody gets No, that is really what's happening here. So I'm once again telling you, Israel is important. Israel, of course, is part of the end times. We might not be able to change anything. It's impossible to think like Russell Brand that suddenly we can put together a movement to change the world. Yeah, Russell Brand. 2,000 years ago, somebody talked about this time. Talked about the fact that they will come with the mark of the beast. And it's happening now. And within the next 7 years, the AI will make that prophecy a reality. Israel might have come together thanks to the wrong people. But then it was important to have Israel to manifest the prophecies. So, and it's important to not blame the Jews who are living, the hard-working Israelis who are living and are prospering in a land that otherwise will be a shithole in the hands of other kinds of people. Now, I'm not saying that all Arabs don't want to work, but, most times they don't. And the fact that their main blessing, God gave, Allah gave him a blessing, and that blessing is oil. Okay? Oil. So today we are here in front of what might develop in a major crisis, with OPEC blocking oil onto the West. We saw it in the first war in 1973, that the prices rise 300%. More money to another war will mean more inflation. The system will inevitably collapse. The people will rise, but they will not be able to do anything because the system is in the hands of a bunch of criminals. I mean, when you see the American police being, distracted by the Israeli police on how they can contain, for example, certain situation, or when we see basically that the people on top, they don't have their interest at heart. They have their own pocket at heart. What was Laura Loomer, what she said about McCarthy, that before going away, he put some money in his...
Yeah, he had taken some money and put it into his own private funds for his election for the House of Senate or whatever, but he was just moving all these billions of dollars into his own account eight days or so before they told him to get out. So, I mean, he's a crook.
Now, Israel has the right to exist. I don't think that Gaza should have been in any way. The problem with Gaza starts with this gentleman here, and actually Barry Kamish says a couple of interesting things here. When it comes to Gaza, Bush backs Gaza withdrawal. Bush. George W. Bush. US President George W. Bush threw his support again behind Prime Minister Sharon unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and parts of the West Bank days before the cabinet is to vote on it. Bush, his decision provides an historical moment of opportunity to begin building a future Palestinian state. Well, Barry Kamish wasn't stupid. Barry Kamish wasn't at all stupid. In fact, Barry Kamish said about all this, yes, peaceniks everywhere, wrote Barry Kamish. Your peacemakers are not interested in peace. No one believes a Gaza pullout will bring peace. Everyone knows it will encourage more such victories through terror. Your Israel peacemakers want to launder endless rolls of cash in the casino, which will be the reward for the pullout. There was a project about a casino. And the foreign powers are salivating at the thought of even more bloodshed, conflict, and best of all, an Israel stripped of its religiosity, patrolled by their troops. That is what Barry Kamish, who has been long dead, wrote a long time ago, and it still makes sense. The strategy has several tentacles, and it goes on to this day, and it will until Israel turns into a Sabbatean state or no state at all. So the enemy is from within. The enemy is from within. In Israel, we have a fake right wing, Netanyahu, a labor Zionist socialist, demented people, pacifist. The crazy thing is that the people who actually died in that raid were people who were against Netanyahu and were actually pro-Palestine, and pacifists who were going to those demonstrations like idiots. They were slaughtered. Maybe a wake-up call to all these pacifists. So it's very important to understand also the nefarious activities of the Oslo Accord. The fact that after Arafat died, just 1 year later, 2005, Gaza, it falls into the hands of these extremists who are holding hostages all these people. That is the big problem. But all of this, the fact that who can believe that the Israeli intelligence, the Shin Bet, the Mossad, didn't know about what will happen? It's impossible. It's literally impossible. It's literally impossible. But that's how it is. And so we have today, of course, not so much time to go through other elements that I would have liked maybe to, but like I said, Jewish author Barry Kamish, who in the summer of 1982 fought in Lebanon war for the Israeli Defense Forces and whose grandparents died in a concentration camp in Poland, wrote in his book, "We now jump to 1933. Less than 1% of the German Jews support Zionism." And suddenly, things changed. And everybody was made to support Zionism. Many tried to escape, says Kamish, from Nazis by boat to Latin and North American ports, but the international diplomatic order was to turn them back. Any German Jew who rejected Palestine would be shipped back to his death. So we have also people who have been forced almost to live in this country and have no sin, nessuna colpa, as we say in Italy. They don't have, is it their fault that they're there and now they find themselves in a situation which could transform itself in the new Ukraine? Because yesterday I heard Chuck Schumer, that the guy, who from the Senate minority Democrats, who said, "Oh, we need to incentivize more airplane companies, so more people, American Jewish people, can leave Israel as soon as possible. They need to leave Israel, leave Israel, leave Israel." So what does it mean? That Israel is about to burst in a bubble of war, become terrible situation like Ukraine? The world today definitely didn't need another war, but because we are in the end times, that's how it is. So once again, thank you for following me and Christy today in this journey. It wasn't easy. It wasn't absolutely easy. It's not easy to talk about these things. It's not easy to. I remember there is one guy who is actually of Jewish origin, Eri Makov, but he's kind of taken positions that at times are a bit controversial and anti-Semitic. He says, the Dr. Eri Makov, I don't know if he's still alive.
I used to do a show.
Yeah, well, I did some interviews and stuff with him. Who candidly refers himself as an assimilated Jew, claims that the Babylonian Talmud and the heretical interpretation of the Jewish Kabbalah undoubtedly contribute to anti-Semitism. I would say, though, and I said myself to Eric Makov, that he should have instead understood Henry, Makov, that in reality the problem is the Sabbatean Frankists. The Sabbatean Frankists, and in fact, In his book published in 2005, Sabbatai Zevi, this book, very Kamish, poses a very sensitive question and then offers an answer that it's very interesting. In 1932, how many organizations in Germany represented German Jewry? Over 250. In 1933, how many? One. And that organization was Labor Zionism. And Labor Zionism is at the basis of the problem here. All those idiots who unfortunately create those, all those libtards that unfortunately populate now Israel and promote all those things like the various transsexual agenda, the gender agenda, all these libtard agendas, the woke
did, like,
agenda.
some kind of a gay thing in Israel. Like
Yes.
Gay
Yes.
parade.
And it's unfortunately all because of labor Zionism. And labor Zionism was started to be promulgated before the third Zionist Congress that took place in 1899. Its philosophy was based on the assumption that the problem of the diaspora of Jews will remain unsolved even after the socialist revolution, and that the solution was basically the immigration of Jews that will then in some way develop in a territorial base their social Zionism, their communistic way. And that's what they did, also in the kibbutz communistic way. So I hope that the social Zionists are exposed. I hope you understand that labor Zionism is not a religious Zionism. It doesn't have anything to do with the religious Zionism. It doesn't even have to do with those people who actually believe that moving to Israel was anyway a positive thing even before the first World Zionist Congress, because there were some people who tried to move there already. And I think that we have all these figures that, of course, we didn't have the time to go in. Like, for example, Aaron David Gordon. This other guy, he was a labor Zionist thinker and the spiritual force behind labor Zionism. This guy is a guy who, of course, is an heretic in Jewish terms. The fact that we have also various forms of Zionism, we have also revisionist Zionism. This, like I said, this guy here, A.D. Gordon, this is one of the most evil guys. And of course, we have to this day this revisionist Zionists that are, for me personally, a big problem within Judaism. They are the ones, the revisionist Zionists are the ones who are destroying the real religiosity of the Jewish people. It was initially led by a guy called Zev Jabotinsky, and later by a guy called Menachem Begin, who later became Prime Minister of Israel. And they supported liberalism, particularly economic liberalism, and opposed, in theory, labor Zionism. But then they became also themselves involved in revisionism. So, in the end, there is no political sides that we can trust in Israel, like we don't have any possibility of trusting any political sides also in America or in Italy or Europe. Here in America, we only have one hope, which is Donald J. Trump, but Donald J. Trump is more than a political identity, a person that, no? Don't you see that, Christy? I mean, if we see what happens with all the people who go to Washington, they all become inevitably corrupt, unfortunately. So even here in America, is there really an alternative? I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. is presenting himself as an independent, but is he going to be able to do anything? No. It's just a show. And I repeat, the only possibility might be Donald J. Trump because he's a maverick. He's a genius. And that's why he also did the Abrahamic Peace Accords that were very important.
He did all the right things.
But, of course, I'm not saying that Trump is perfect. There is no political perfection. The only thing that I respect of Trump rather than another politician that they can't buy Trump because Trump is actually a guy who is a self-made billionaire and doesn't need the corruption like Obama, who you can buy by just giving him a book contract or some money for a Netflix hypothetical series. That's how they buy these people. Of course, I understand people might disagree with me, but the program of the transmission that we did today was mainly to make clear that I think there is at the moment a lot of taking sides that is erroneous. What do you want to say in the conclusion of this transmission, of this broadcast today, Christy?
You have to be really smart to understand all of this. It's a lot of names and a lot of info, but thank you for explaining it. Now I understand.
I hope that I managed. I tell you the truth. It's not been easy.
I learned so much today.
It's not been easy. I wish I had more time. I wish I had the possibility of really relating to you everything that I deem important. But I think for the limited time span we transmitted, which is 90 minutes almost.
No, it's more than that, isn't it?
No, maybe it's more than that. It's actually 1 hour and 46 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, we managed to at least, I hope, make our sponsors happy. Who were our sponsors, Christy?
We have 3, Bruce and Keith Woods and Thomas Birmingham. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce Codish. Thanks to all the others. And if you want to sponsor our next broadcast, Christy, what do they have to do? Because it's very important that we managed to bring forward that transmission here. Also because, unfortunately, there is no sign on the heat going down here in Palm Springs. We keep on this air conditioning, which is extremely expensive. So what can...
Cash App, or you can donate on Cash App or GoFundMe. Or if you don't have Leo's books, you can donate. You can buy a book, and yeah.
That's another.
And you can donate to your favorite priest and teach them something, or your favorite rabbi. Just donate all the books to everyone so they all understand what's going on.
That's good. That's good. So thank you so much for following us today, and I see that at least the people seem happy about what we try to do, and don't take sides. Just think about what is about to happen. The Messiah is arriving, is coming. For the Jews, is coming for the first time. They will recognize him. For the Christians, it's the second encounter. And of course, also the Muslims recognize that. But the Abrahamic faiths have this moment, which, of course, at one point, they will finally realize, why are we fighting each other?
Yeah.
Why are we fighting each other?
It's so silly.
It's very silly. Thank you so much.
We have to love each other.
God bless you all.
Love.
And see you next week with the Leo Zagami Show.
Love all around. Bye, everyone.
Rambo?
He's
asleep. What's Rambo? He's asleep.
I don't want to bug him.
Okay, take care. Enjoy. And from Palm Springs, California, that's all. And a little bit more next week. Don't miss the Leo Zagami Show.